Today's program is going to be extremely informational for you about the upcoming election. You don't want to miss it. Today I have Christian Briggs, who is the CEO of Hard Asset Management. Come right back. Welcome back to the program today with me, Christian Briggs. We're so excited to have you fly in and come and be on the program. Yep. And you are so full of information that I think the viewers need to hear, because you are basically on the front lines with Congress, with your business. And so I want to jump in and first ask you, what is the Corporate Transparency Act?
So the Corporate Transparency Act is a bill that was put into back in 21, a piece of legislation, and it was slipped in there. And what it did is it defined how you start to report to the Financial Crimes Division of the IRS all of your beneficial ownership, foundations, trusts, corporations, SC, LLCs. What the Democrats, being they, slipped in there was all this understood requirements that makes you have to turn over all of this information, personal information that's never been asked before. We're talking about birth cards or birthdays of all your children, yourself, anniversaries, wedding certificates, passports, driver's license, the name of the entities, where they were incorporated, foreign, domestic, bank accounts. What it basically does is it takes all of your personal information and it hands it to the Financial Crimes Division, okay, of the IRS. So you have to upload this thing. It's due before the end of this year. So come January 1st, the IRS on about 33 to 34 million small businesses will have all this information. And how intrusive is it? I'm glad you asked, because here's how bad it is. Not only does the small business cover 99.9% of all business activity in the United States, it basically covers all the people that have small business from 0 employees up to 500. So you're canvassing, the IRS being they are canvassing the entire demographic of owners of businesses. I don't care if it's a florist, maybe it's a church, it could be a nonprofit, it could be anybody. So the CTA, Corporate Transparency Act, basically determines who owns what, all the personal information. It's the first step for the IRS and the government to start to determine you own this, oh, and you have assets in that, well, now we're going to start taxing you, or we're going to confiscate that. That's what the intent was for the bill.
So the main purpose of this act is to tax people and to see what their assets are, where they're going, and to track everything in our lives. Because the people need to understand. I want you to open listeners' eyes to see, why is this so detrimental to me as a person watching this program? Why could this hurt me as a person at home watching?
Okay, remember, small businesses is what the Democrats want to target the most, right? If you can eliminate the small business and give all of that business market share to the larger corporations, the Googles for search, the Amazons for retail, the Facebooks for interconnecting news now, right? It's not even about college stuff. Facebook has become almost the largest news provider, media company, Microsoft. And then you have a host of smaller companies, but still big in their own right, that basically support the Democratic agenda and the ideology. If you can eliminate all of those small businesses, where does that money go? Where do the customers go? That goes up. And I'll give you an example. Do you know who the largest advocator is for the last probably on that 15 years to raise the minimum wage? Who's the largest advocator? Amazon. You know why they want the minimum wage to go up?
Why?
Because it destroys small businesses. They can't afford to pay $25 an hour, $20 an hour. So the small businesses close. And guess who gets that retail business?
Amazon.
Amazon. See, what people don't realize is there's a method to this madness. The question you have to ask yourself is, why? Well, just look up. So the largest corporations in COVID, right, were all Democrat. They got the largest share of the COVID money and the wealth grab. There was a recent study done, and I have to agree with this study. Sometimes I don't, but this one I did. If you look at the wealth creation from late 20, early 21, all the way through early this year, kind of like mid this year, the greatest wealth creation was in the top 250 people in America. Their net worth, in most cases, doubled. But did you know that the bottom 75% of America, their income and or their net worth went down a staggering 30%?
30%.
Yep. In some cases, more than that. So what they did was they realigned and created a dependency world. So that going back to your original question, the Corporate Transparency Act is going to do two things. It's going to identify who you are, who and what you own, and then when they start to institute this wealth tax we're talking about, now they know where to get your money. It's all about wealth confiscation.
Are you saying then that the small business owners, but also the middle class, because Kamala and the Democrats make it sound like they're going to help the middle class, but what you're saying is it's going to hurt them dramatically?
Sure, absolutely. Like Walmart. What did Walmart do for the small communities? What did it do for the small community businesses?
They took away the small businesses that were already in the mom and pop shops.
Right.
They eliminated those.
They eliminated them. They actually were more detrimental to the community than maintaining the small businesses that were already there collectively.
But they didn't realize that while it was happening.
Correct. They didn't realize that. And what you have to realize, and this goes back to the same thing the Democratic ideology is, in order to create a one-party rule, you have to have the majority of the voters. We can agree on that. How do you get the majority of the voters on your side? You have to offer them something. They have to find greater value in your party, your ideology, than the other guy. So let's talk about that. So when you start to look at wealth confiscation or the CTA law, it all goes back to one thing. If I can destroy the middle class, I can destroy the small businesses, I'm creating a state of dependency. Now, if you're dependent upon me for you to eat, for you to survive, for you to thrive, guess who you're going to vote for? Because you're not going to bite the hand that feeds you, are you?
No.
No. I'll give you some stats on how well this has been going for them. When Trump took office, he came in there with a pro-business agenda, a Christian pro-business agenda. The man could not be bought. Now, we know this. 49 to 52% of America was clearly not paying taxes whatsoever inside the labor force.
That's unbelievable.
Some people say 52, 53, some say 49, 50, but in that range, 51, 52. What he did was he came in and cut taxes. We know this. He cut regulations. You know what happened within a year? That
tax bracket.
Yeah, well, the non-taxpayer, I call it the non-labor force. They basically went down to 47, 46, 45%. He lifted more people, African American, Hispanic people, out of an area of low income to middle income. Here comes Joe Biden with all of his freebies. You want to know where that stands now, that percentage?
Where? Probably
62% of America doesn't pay taxes. They're not involved in the labor force, which means they get their money either from a federal, state, or local level. They're getting some type of either full or partial handout. Either way, they're not paying taxes, but they're surviving. They're not thriving, but they're surviving. You know what they call that? Dependency. They call that the voters of the Democratic Party. Now that number may even be much higher. What I can't determine right now, and I don't think anybody can except for the Democrats, is could that number be closer to 70% with all the illegal immigrants that have come in?
Sure it is.
Because they're all getting benefits.
Right.
They may not be counted into that pool. I do know this, 62% is correct. Here's another bad stat. When Trump took office, about 70%, 71% of America was living paycheck to paycheck. He dropped that to about 60%. Today, we're at almost 80% paycheck to paycheck. Inflation, you would almost, if you were looking at Treasury Secretary Yellen, who has a PhD in economics, Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, if I could sit those two down and ask them, you're telling me you put $9 trillion into society plus our normal spending as a federal government like that, and you're telling me that inflation was transitory or was going to be here and gone tomorrow, either you're lying or you're as dumb as a stump. It's one or the other, okay? But I think you're lying. I think you knew what you were doing to create what? Hardship. Inflation goes up. You know what with it? Dependency. That's the ideology. That's what Lenin did. That's what Stalin did. They created a state of dependency, and that became the Soviet Union. People need to realize that the Democratic Party is not about solving issues for the middle class or growing wealth. No, it's about dependency, and the wealth goes up.
Which is socialism.
It can almost be hardcore socialism with a little bit of communist light thrown in there.
And so I want the viewers to understand, I'm doing this program to help open people's eyes to see the truth. And so you work tightly with Congress. Tell me about what you're doing in Congress besides this act. What else are you doing in Congress? You're working with Warren.
Yeah, I'm working with members of both the Senate and the House on helping them identify some of the things of which that they're so busy, and God bless every one of them, they stay super busy to get Trump elected and keep their own races going. So about 4.5, 5 years ago, I brought it to the attention of some members of both the House and the Senate that the Federal Reserve may be actually building a digital currency on a centralized distributed ledger. Centralized systems is like a closed loop. If I centralize power and I centralize the way the money flows, I control you. I can tell you what to spend that money on and tell you what you can't spend the money on. So what I did was I alerted members of Congress and I said, hey, you need to look into this. I believe that the Federal Reserve is outsourcing the building of a central bank digital currency, and I believe they're doing it and usurping Congress's authority because only Congress can approve a new form of money. Not only was I right, they determined that they already had built this thing, and the way they usurped Congress is they didn't need their approval because they weren't going to issue this thing to the retail public. Okay, let's take a step back. CTA, this is going to all come full circle. Since 99.9% of all business that's conducted in the United States is done on the small business level. If you create a commercial CBDC, which goes to commercial businesses like small businesses, you usurp Congress authority. You don't need them. And Jerome Powell, you actually said in front of Congress, I don't need your authority to do a commercial CBDC. So he did it. And what that means is small businesses would be the way they enact this, and then they put this out in distribution. Since that's 99.9% of businesses in America are small, and you put that out there, it'll proliferate itself and get adoption and consumption instantly.
So you're saying that, I'm going to break it down into terms where people can understand it.
Mm-hmm.
They're wanting a one world economy.
Mm-hmm.
They're wanting, basically, in the United States, we know is the most powerful country, I believe, in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And they're wanting a one world government. They're wanting to take this to United Nations. They're wanting this to be a one powerhouse and control. That's the bottom line.
Correct. And how you know that is, I want everyone watching this program to go look on the UN, their website, and I want you to, or do a search. Don't use Google. We don't want to use Google. But do a search, and I want you to put United Nations signs New World Order Government Understanding. The press release is actually on their website. The United States, with literally hundreds of other leaders around the world and dozens of countries, got together and they've signed a pact to agree on a unified one world government. They're so brazen about it, it's on their website, and it was done on September 22nd of this year of 2024.
So I want everyone to understand this is the Democratic, this is their ticket. This is what they believe in. This is what they're sold out to, which is opposite of what Trump is saying, the Republican Party. It's completely opposite.
Completely opposite. Okay, so what we have here is this. We have people within government that wants government to be the sole body of how we are to determine to be lived by, whether it's the religious side, whether it's the work side, the social side, however it is, government is going to be the new religion, and that's what the Democratic Party has become. It's really become a party of atheists, socialists, and communists. At the end of the day, that's pretty much what it is. So think about that type of mindset. Now, Trump, strong Christian man. He's a warrior, businessman, dad, great guy in every respect. Guy's a killer, but in the best way. Because what he says is what the founding fathers said, limited government, if there is a government, run by the people, or certainly accountable to the people. They've always been a party of greater power, influence over the small, or what they consider to be the less fortunate people. Sometimes power and wealth gives you this understanding that you're superior. So the Democratic Party is all about arrogance, intolerance, and power.
How does the illegal immigrants coming into our country affect not only this election, but affect our lives? I'm flipping the switch here to another topic. How does that affect us?
Well, first of all, it's taken about 1.5 to 2 million jobs away from American citizens. That's been noted. Number two, it's inflating our benefits and the costs. I did an analysis the other day for some people, and I determined that probably from the time that Joe Biden took office through the time he's out of office and Trump takes back office in January of 25.
I hope.
Oh, he will. He's got to. He's the man. then we'll have spent about $1 trillion between the federal, state, local levels, between what FEMA has spent just to settle them initially, to get them here, settle them, and then the ongoing costs. I mean, New York City alone is spending $1 billion a year. That's one city. There's 600 cities right now that are spending these crazy amounts of money. So at the end of the day, it doesn't just skew our benefits and then take away from the citizens because now there's no money for them, or it's watering down the benefit value. And number two, what about voters? Let's go to the really heart of the issue. The only reason they brought them in and gave them under a executive order a loophole of legality to some degree. We can argue that another day, but today it's been upheld to the sense that they have the right to be here under asylum, under a hostile environment that they're leaving and that they're coming here to be able not to be persecuted for whatever the reasons are. Under those terms, they're allowed to have residency, and guess what else? Benefits and voter registration. So how many came across the border? 10 million, 20 million? How many were already here for the last 10 years that were hiding that the Democrats went back to and said, oh, you know what? I didn't tell you this, but you were an asylum seeker, I'm sure of it, right? Oh, absolutely. Check that box. There's your voter registration card, there's your residency card. Oh, and here's about $10,000 every month. Who are you gonna vote for, or the person that's continuing to hand out? So I don't know the number, 15 million, 20, 30, 40 million. We don't know what was here and what came in and how many could be flipped over to vote Democrat. That's the scary part. That's why we need every single person to vote for Trump.
I'm glad you brought that up because this is a pivotal election, probably the greatest, I would say, in the history of the United States. Because I don't think people understand, and I hope this will be given awareness, that and I've heard statistics that Christians vote less than non-Christians. And so I hope this is an awareness to people listening of how important the Christian vote is this election. Because it doesn't only affect, like we've mentioned, the small business and all these other things, but it really affects our freedom. It's the freedoms that, when you don't vote, you're saying, I'm allowing my freedom to be given up. It's all about freedom. Talk about freedom.
Okay. So this election is going to determine two things. It's going to determine the value of free. Free, before we say freedom, let's talk about free. Kamala Harris is offering expanded Medicare for all. Free health care, basically.
And that includes immigrants, legal immigrants. It's everybody.
It's everybody, but you know what? They're at the top of the list. Oh, it's beyond socialism. It's a dependency system that again goes back to more of communism. Communism created an entire value for what, decades in Soviet Union and the other 13 or 12, 13 other countries in that Eastern Bloc. For almost 70 years, there was pure dependency. You basically got shelter, okay? You didn't have a car, but you had means of transportation, buses or whatever to get to your employment. You didn't have any money. You actually got food stamps. You know about how this worked? This is what's different today. Welfare is your job. Government housing, Section 8, is your shelter. And food stamps is the means of which you go get bread and some meats. So the more they expand that, the more they're creating this level of dependency. And so when you start to look at what this election is all about, is a determination one way. Do we work for it and create great wealth and prosperity and then use that money for the kingdom? Are we going to be good persons and good stewards of that? Or are we going to vote ourselves into a state of dependency where it's no longer matters how hard you work or what you believe, because you have no method to be able to create the wealth, maintain it, and then to spend it in whether it's God's way, your way, or a lot of the above.
Which is entitlement. Tell us about the health care. What would that look like for the typical person who they had a heart attack or whatever you want to name, and they need to go immediately to get health care? What would that look like if we were under this communism type ran country?
Okay. Let's talk about the heart attack. You're 24 years old, you have some medical emergency, whether it's a heart attack or it's an aneurysm, something that immediately requires a physician. You're going to get that. Not great health care, and it's substandard at best.
Because you're 24, though.
That's what I'm talking about. Now,
the youth gets taken care of first.
You know where I'm going with this. I know this. I studied healthcare in HHS in England and some of the way they do it in Europe. They have a list, and that list basically is a priority.
You go on a priority list is
Bingo.
exactly how communism works.
That's right. If you're over 65 or 70 and you're having a heart attack, the best thing you can hope for is some type of a government funeral expense, because they're not going to help you. They're going to look and say, oh, look, Grandpa Joe's down there. Oh, okay, call the funeral. They ain't calling no ambulance. They ain't calling the emergency room. They're calling the funeral parlor. Why? Well, because Uncle Joe or Grandpa Joe is dead. He has no value and productivity within that society. The Soviet Union used to say, from 18 to 45, that's it. Do you realize that the average death during the Soviet Union was in the 50s? That was the average age for a male, lasting somewhere between low to mid 50s. You know why? When you have no hope, you have depression. What's the number one thing that you take for depression?
Suicide.
Alcohol.
Or alcohol.
Alcohol. Do you know that you ever heard this term, alcohol babies, where you go and adopt children from Russia and they have massive side effects? 75 years of drinking alcohol creates side effects, creates birth defects. They have defects because there was no hope. So you drowned out the depression through
With
vodka.
alcohol, yeah.
Well, vodka was their mainstay. The government would actually give it to you for free. Why not? Think about it. I got you a shelter. I got you one channel watching propaganda, media. But you got no hope. But you know what you got? Go look in the freezer. You got a bottle of vodka. And you heard the stories. They were alcoholics. Unbelievable. And so when you start to think about that, when you have no hope, you have depression. But you're also compliant. You're going to do what the state tells you to do.
Yeah, because you're not thinking clearly.
You can't think clearly. So the average age in the Soviet Union days for a male was about 54, 53, 52 years old. That's it.
So viewers listening, it's just so important that we open our eyes to see we are literally a vote away from going down more of the pathway. We're already on this pathway having Biden in office. But this is such a critical election for people to get out and vote, because you're basically voting to be free.
Let me put it this way. Prior to about the last, I would say since Obama, our generations of the past always voted not for ourselves, but our kids and grandkids. That's what was the mentality, right? Christians would say, it's not about me, it's about the kingdom, it's about the
future,
the legacy, okay? We've stopped, okay? Social media has created individual people, like influencers are gods, right? So our mindset has to go back to what it was. So here's how it works. This election is one vote away from taking the greatest country in the experiment. It was an experiment. At the end of the day, the Founding Fathers says, because it took them, 12 years to write the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and vote on it, because there were so many arguments. But they got it done because it was principled in God. 91, 92 different circumstances within the Constitution parlayed back to Christian values. This election is the determination of one thing. If we lose this election, if people don't get off their seats and get out to vote, your children and grandchildren will go the way of Cuba, Venezuela, Soviet Union, North Korea. And not only has it gotten that hard, go to parts of the country, go to LA, go see what's going on in Compton, go to San Francisco. It is communism. Socialism is not there anymore. You're paying up to 70% of your taxes in some municipalities inside the state of California, because there's not just a state tax, federal tax, there's a city tax. Go to New York City, you can pay 70% of your income. That's not capitalism, okay? That's communism. That's where you have no ability unless you're at the very, very top of the food chain. And what happens to those people? They do trust. They do methods of which to work around those tax rates to lower those tax rates to like 10%. See? So what we're voting for here is not the prosperity you and I have had, it's prosperity for the kids and grandkids. So if you find value in your family, go vote. And if somebody can't drive to vote, grab them, offer them a Starbucks something and give them a free ride, but let's get people to vote. Mathematically, we can blow the Democrats out of the water. If every registered Republican votes, Trump will take this country and put it back to the Christianity foundation it was set on, and I promise you, God's favor will come back fast.
I agree with that, and that's why I had you on this program, because I think it is the most detrimental thing for us to help viewers understand. This is your vote for freedom, and if you don't vote, you're giving up your freedom in the near future, but especially for the future of your children and grandchildren.
Correct.
It's just imperative that we vote.
Because if you don't vote, you can either pay a little now or you can give it all up then. Because make no mistake, I believe in what Elon has said, Trump has said, senators and congressmen have said. This is the most critical vote in the history of the United States. It determines whether we maintain capitalism or we start to move toward a bedrock of communism. Socialism will be immediately instituted, and communism will be the next conclusion within the next 4 to 8 years.
And if we get the right people in our senators, our government, our president, and that's how we can make a change. Of course, prayer. Prayer is going to be the top of the list. But our second thing we can do is by doing something physical, spiritual and physical. It boils down to spiritual and physical. Well, our time is up. And it's been a great valuable, I think, to listeners to hear from someone that is directly involved with Congress, directly involved with knowing the currency, knowing that this socialism could turn into communism, and giving viewers an inside information from so much history. And I just appreciate you're a wealth of knowledge, and we appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you for all that you're doing. I pray that God continues to protect you and bless you, and keep fighting for the Christians, for the people. I believe God is hearing our heart, and I just believe, and I want to close in prayer right now, Christian. Okay. Father God, I just pray, Lord, that you would open the eyes of the people that are viewing this. God, open their eyes to see the truth, and the truth, God, that you give them from this program, the truth that you give them in their heart, that you'll spiritually open their eyes to see that all of these things that we're talking about is not a conspiracy, but it's something that it's detrimental to this next election. And so, Lord, I pray that people will physically go and vote, that they'll spiritually pray, God, that we can get conservative values back into our government. But God, I pray they physically go and make a difference in this election, that you would persuade their heart to physically go and vote for our freedoms. Our freedoms are so important, Lord, and we thank you, God, that we are one nation under God, and we're for the people. And so, Lord, we just pray from this, God, that people will be moved so strongly to do what they can do, and that is to go and vote in this election, and to pray, God, that we will keep our freedom, first of all, for you, God, but our freedom of speech and the freedoms that our founding fathers brought to us years ago. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for you.